When you develop that, let me know.
That was all right.
Afternoon, welcome to our briefing.
Can you hold up for a minute? Jack McCarthy forgot his pen.
Jack McCarthy forgot his pen. I thought that ABC handled everything on tape and they never needed pens or pencils.
We can start, Jackson.
I told him to wait.
I'm glad to know you can write. First of all, I'd like to welcome Brigadier General Amos Gilad, who is the Public Affairs Advisor to the Israeli Defense Force and is visiting Washington for a week and will be taken around through the various service offices and the joint staff here, so welcome. I have no statements and I'm prepared to take your questions.
India said today it's going to deploy a new medium-range missile. What's the department's reaction to that?
They were supposed to have the 15th test today of the Prithvi missile, which I understand. I understand, however, that the test was canceled for technical reasons. We are working very hard in the Indian subcontinent with both Pakistan and India to try to reduce tensions and to slow an arms buildup there. We think that deployment of this medium-range missile would go in the wrong direction and create new tensions rather than reduce tensions in what is arguably one of the most dangerous, least stable areas of the world right now. So we would urge restraint on all sides, including India. Jamie.
On the subject of North Korea, could you comment on the press reports about Americans that may still be held by North Korea or may be held by North Korea? Can you comment on that?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I think it's important to go back in time to the Korean War and deal with a whole series of revelations or allegations, reports that have come out over the last couple of days. First of all, there have been some reports in the South Korean press that there may be some American POWs from the Korean War still living in North Korea. There have been American intelligence reports conveying information to that effect. We have no evidence that these reports are correct. Intelligence reports convey all sorts of information. We have no confirmation whatsoever that there are living POWs from the Korean War in North Korea. We do know that there are some Americans who defected to North Korea in the 1960s who are alive there today. There were 4 defectors in the 1960s, and there were 2 defectors later than that, one in 1979 and 1982. We believe that the 2 later defectors are no longer alive. We believe that the 4 who defected in 1960 are still alive. We don't know for a fact, but we believe that. Some of these defectors from the 1960s, and we can give you their names afterwards. I have their names, but you can get them from Bev Baker and DDI. Some of these defectors were in a North Korean propaganda film called Nameless Heroes. So we have seen them on film in the last several years. That is basically the situation. I might add one other fact about North Korea. There are still 8,100 servicemen missing or unaccounted for from the Korean War. And as you know, we held some talks in Honolulu recently with representatives of North Korea on to explore questions of returning remains, identification of remains, etc. Those talks were inconclusive, and no further talks have been scheduled, although we're hopeful that we can continue a dialogue with North Korea over getting access to information about remains in North Korea.
By inconclusive, were they uncooperative?
They ended, we agreed to nothing. But there, as you know, we have a dialogue now with North Korea over their nuclear program, and our hope is we can also start a dialogue with them, a continuing dialogue with them over the remains issue as well.
Ken,
Bob.
during those talks in Honolulu, did the U.S. delegation raise this matter of the 4 defectors and what their status might be or their condition?
I'm not aware that that came up. This was, these were fairly technical talks that dealt with the issue of remains.
Have there been other U.S. government inquiries to the North Koreans about the status of those Americans?
I'm not aware that there have been.
Or any kind of communication with them?
I'm not aware that we've communicated with them recently on this, but I don't know.
Do you believe they're teaching English, all of them, at this institute in North Korea?
Our reports are that they are teaching English there,
Do you know
yes.
anything else about them? Have they?
We know very little about them.
But you have seen 2 of them in this movie,
Right.
and are there sightings of the others that lead you to believe they're alive? How do you?
I do not know on what basis we believe the others to be alive. Yes.
How did you get to know the 2 defected in the 70s already died over there?
I do not know how we know that, but that's our belief, that they're no longer alive.
Does the U.S. have any desire to speak to these 4 former Americans? Are they still considered Americans? What are they considered?
I don't know what they consider themselves to be. I don't know what they consider their citizenship to be.
But is there a desire on the part of the U.S. government to speak to them?
We're always anxious to speak to people who can give us more information about North Korea. It remains a closed, secretive society.
Is there a de facto renunciation of citizenship when you take a step like that?
I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe Bev Baker does. We'll try to find out.
Do you know the circumstances of their defection, how they did it?
In the 1960s? No, I do not.
Change
Charlie.
the subject.
Sure.
Non-aligned diplomats in New York at the UN are reporting that Nazir Hamdoun, the Iraqi ambassador, says that Iraq is now prepared to discuss limited sales of oil and return to get money for humanitarian aid. You have any reaction to that?
You're talking about Resolution 986,
That's right.
which allows limited sales of oil
6 months on.
over 6 months, and the proceeds of which are to be used to help the Iraqi people.
They say they're now ready to non-aligned diplomats say that Hamdoun says that they're now ready to discuss it without any preconditions.
Well, I think that would be an important step forward, but we should not see this as a concession. Resolution 986 was enacted by the UN to help the Iraqi people, and Saddam Hussein has steadfastly refused to sell any oil under 986, reportedly because he doesn't want the monitoring that goes with the imposition of the resolution. He has chosen to spend money on new palaces. He's chosen to spend money on military improvements and a number of other investments that have not helped his people, have not fed his people, have not rebuilt civilian infrastructure. So if he is now willing to allow this resolution to take effect for the benefit of the people of Iraq, that's good news.
Can you tell us now, 5 years after the Gulf War, whether you believe, the Pentagon believes that Iraq still possesses any chemical or biological weapons capability?
This is something we're watching all the time, and as you know, UNSCOM investigators are in Iraq, in and out of Iraq. As you know, the UN resolutions require them to get rid of all weapons of mass destruction, and that's what we're monitoring.
But you don't know whether that goal has been reached
I don't
yet?
want to comment on the exact state of their armaments now.
Could you give just a brief assessment of what the Iraq military strength is now compared to following the Gulf War? Have they been able to rebuild reconstitute
Well,
a
I don't
half
think
of
that's I don't think that's the proper baseline for comparison. The proper baseline for comparison is what their strength was before the war, and it's dramatically down from what it was before the war. There have been some efforts to rebuild their military, and focusing on the Republican Guard forces. We believe that the military is still a worrisome force, and the effort that they put into maintaining a military force is particularly worrisome in light of the civilian demands within Iraq. The choices that they choose to make in favor of the military or in favor of new palaces for Saddam Hussein over helping the people of Iraq are very worrisome, and I think they show a state of mind that we have to take very seriously, and we have taken it very seriously. As you know, we have a very substantial military force in and around the Gulf. We monitor the movements of the Iraqi force very carefully, and we have set up a no-fly, no drive zone south of the 32nd parallel, which we monitor very carefully. Yes.
Looking back at the Gulf War, President Bush said that he miscalculated. Do you see that from the military point of view there was any miscalculation or any major problem, faults with how the war has been conducted?
I think I should leave all comments on the execution of the Gulf War to those who actually made the decisions, and no good will be served from my commenting on their comments on what happened 5 years ago.
Can we just get, for the record, if you don't have it on the top of your head, just a rough estimate of the current strength of the Iraqi forces, perhaps, a rough estimate of tanks or aircraft?
You could get that from the IASS, but if you want, we will give you afterwards a rough estimate of the strength of the Iraqi forces. Yes, Chris.
The Mujahideen operating in Bosnia, or believed to still be operating in Bosnia, how does the U.S. or the Pentagon see that? Is that a problem? Is that something that's being dealt with?
All foreign forces were, the foreign forces who were in Bosnia when the agreement took effect were supposed to be out on January 13th. The I-4 commanders are currently assessing the compliance with that rule, and when they complete their assessment, we'll let you know what they've found. We do know that there has been a very significant reduction in foreign forces in Bosnia. We're talking about Croatians as well as in Bosnia, as well as the Mujahideen. So it's being assessed now. We believe there has been very significant compliance. We're not in a position right now to tell you there's been total compliance, and we may not be, because it's a very difficult issue to monitor. For instance, some of the Mujahideen may have decided to become Bosnian citizens or to marry, and there are provisions for them, certain provisions that allow them to stay. But we believe that there has been a very significant and important reduction in foreign forces in Bosnia.
That's overall foreign forces, not specifically in Mujahideen.
Mujahideen as well. We think there's been a very significant reduction. What we can't tell you is whether it's been complete and what the status is now. But
Can you quantify that in terms other than significant reduction, percentages, round figures?
no. I mean, our numbers, one of the problems here is getting precise numbers at any part of the, sort of any part of the scenario in terms of these forces.
Does I-4 have the authority to do anything about it if they don't leave or refuse to leave?
Well, it's the job of the parties to compel compliance with the agreement. And what we would do first is talk to the various governments to make sure that they've done everything they can do to achieve compliance with the agreement. Since you brought up the issue of compliance, the next major deadline is January 19th on Friday, and that's when the the forces are supposed to withdraw behind zones of separation. That's already going on, and we have every evidence right now that that will be successful and that the forces will, in fact, meet that deadline of January 19th.
Can you?
Yes.
Sorry.
On another subject, or are you still
Sure.
on?
Still on Bosnia?
No, go ahead on Bosnia.
Can you help us a little bit with the human rights abuses, what I-4 will or will not do, since there seems to be sort of an evolving position on the part of the U.S. government on that issue?
The U.S. government position has been very clear from the beginning, and it's spelled out in the Dayton Agreement. There has not been an expansion of the I-4 mission.
The President has sort of indicated that we might take a little more active role in making sure that under certain circumstances, Secretary of Defense has as well, that we'll be more actively involved in the mass grave part of this.
The place you should look in the agreement is pages 11 and 12. That's the language that specifies what I-4 can and can't do. And the agreement requires I-4 to maintain freedom of movement for its own troops. And it gives I-4 commanders, this is on pages 11 and 12, the authority to provide freedom of movement of others. And if they are requested to do so, and they have the resources to do so, they can guarantee freedom of movement for human rights investigators, for the War Crimes Tribunal, for humanitarian workers, etc. What the President has said and the Secretary have said is that once I-4 is in place and monitoring the zones of separation and feel that it is able to carry out its job, then the commanders will provide freedom of movement for War Crimes Tribunal investigators if requested to do so.
And last week, I believe you said that the U.S. was, without being asked, really, has repositioned some intelligence capabilities to look at the area where the mine, where allegedly evidence was being destroyed by having bodies dumped down a mine. Has that taken place? Have new assets been focused on that?
I'm not in a position to, I assume that it has taken place, but I don't know for sure.
And has there been any...
I want to say that this fits into a pattern of cooperation with the War Crimes Tribunal. This is not a new initiative on our part to cooperate and to help them get information on alleged mass grave sites. We've been providing information for a long period of time, and what we decided to do was to focus assets on this particular site.
And has there been, to your knowledge, any feedback on that site, the activeness of it since the story
I
appeared
do
last
not know.
week?
I can't answer that question. Charlie.
General Sally and the Secretary said on the way to Bosnia that well over half of the combat troops would be in Bosnia by the 19th. How many of the 20,000 are now in Bosnia?
In Bosnia, as of yesterday, there were 9,664 American troops. They're coming in at the rate of 500 to 600 a day, so we'll clearly be up to 11,000, 11,500. It looks to me as if we'll be up to about 11,000 by January 19th, which is more than half. Yeah. Yeah, Bob.
Last week you mentioned that the plan was to put off work on the second bridge over the Sava River to concentrate more on improving the living conditions for the troops around there. Is that still the case?
Yes. We estimate that well, it is still the case, and there are two reasons for that. One, General Crouch decided that the resources would be better spent improving quality of life for the troops, particularly around the Sava River. And secondly, the single bridge has adequate capacity to bring in the rolling stock we need now. Chris?
On more or less the same subject, there have been some complaints percolating to the surface as to the one-year length of deployment and questions as to why there isn't a shorter deployment as there, I suppose, has been in recent history, at least, for this engagement. Is there some reason why this is a full one-year deployment for the forces there?
It was a decision made by the European Command, and based on the requirements that they saw for the mission. As you know, there was very extensive training provided for people going into Bosnia, and a lot of the training dealt with mine awareness and mine removal, but it was much broader than that. And the commanders felt that in order to make the mission as safe and as secure as possible, it's important to send only highly trained people down there. And they believed that by keeping the people for the whole length of the mission, a year, that would maximize the security of the force. Secretary Perry has said, I want to point out one thing, that although we plan to be out of there in a year, he has suggested that some of the troops may start coming out before a year is up. So I don't think that the 1 year means that every single soldier will be there for a year. First of all, as you can tell, it's now almost a month after the agreement took effect, and we have only about 10,000 soldiers there. So many of the soldiers will end up spending less than a year in Bosnia.
Well, you're saying you don't have enough highly trained troops to provide for 6-month rotation?
That's not what I said. It's a mischief-making suggestion that's what I said, but I don't know what happened to your ears. I didn't say that. I said that EUCOM decided that they would send, for the sake of the integrity of the mission, it would be better to leave people there for the entire mission. Whether that, and for some people, that will turn out to be less than a year.
Doesn't that put a bit of a hardship on the families, particularly won't be seeing their loved ones for a year? So, I mean, for instance, in Haiti, didn't they have 6-month rotations in Haiti?
All military deployments impose some sort of inconvenience on families. This is a volunteer army. The people are well trained. They know what they're getting into. Their morale is high. They're enthusiastic about their job, and they're doing it extremely well.
How many troops are in Croatia and Hungary while we're at it?
In Croatia, there are 4,589 as of yesterday. In Hungary, there are 7,382 as of yesterday. In Italy, there are 1,212. For a total, I know you're going to ask me, of 22,847 troops in the theater.
Regarding the equipping and training, the training aspects, has the Pentagon let any contracts or any other agencies or any other non-governmental agencies to go in and train the Bosnian Muslims?
No.
Who's going to fund that?
That is being worked out. It'll probably be funded by other countries.
Can you tell us what is being done to prepare for this training of the Bosnian Muslims?
Well, the person who is in charge of our aspect of equipping and training is Jim Pardue, who's now moved over to the State Department. He recently returned from the area where he met with officials in Sarajevo, in Zagreb and Belgrade, to explain what we were doing, and in order to provide complete transparency for this mission. You've read the agreement, so you know what some of the timelines are in this. The primary emphasis is on arms control and trying to reduce the size of arsenals, particularly in heavy weapons. And there is an arms control regime associated, included in the Dayton Agreement. Arms control talks have begun, first in Germany. There was a second round in Vienna, and they'll continue. The arms control agreement is supposed to be reached within 6 months. We know that arms control will not be enough to provide stability in the area. What we're talking about is a defensive capability by the Federation forces. So there will be some training of the Federation forces and perhaps some arming as well. There's in the agreement a 3-month prohibition on shipments of any weapons into Bosnia, including small weapons. That expires 3 months after the signing of the agreement, and then there's a 6-month moratorium on shipment of heavy weapons into Bosnia, and we will honor those those moratoriums scrupulously.
I guess what's unclear.
The training can begin before that, and that's what we've been discussing with the Federation.
I guess what's unclear is to what extent that training would be done by the U.S. military or by U.S.
There'll be absolutely no training done by the U.S. military, no training done by IFOR. That's been very clear from the beginning. It's clear in the agreement. It's been clear in the congressional testimony by Secretary Christopher, Secretary Perry, and others. So any training that takes place will be done by people who are outside of the U.S. military and outside of the implementation force in Bosnia.
And that would be U.S., that would include contract employees, retired U.S.
One of the points that was made on Mr. Pardu's visit was the suggestion that the Federation hire an overall firm to manage the operation, to manage the contracting, manage the equipment and training, sort of an overall contractor. You might hire a contract. I'm sure we have a contractor organizing the pounding in this building that we hear during all the briefings. And that's where the stories came out over the weekend that private contractors have been brought on board. They have not yet been brought on board. There are no contracts signed. These would be contracts between the Bosnian Federation and private companies, not between the U.S. government and private companies.
But the U.S. is facilitating.
Well, the U.S. has made it very clear that we would help organize and equip and train operation. That's been clear from the beginning.
If the U.S. government is not likely to pay for this and does not have forces involved in the training, how do you maintain control that the training will only go to certain levels as perceived, as you try to create a balance in the fighting force? Isn't it possible that this could get out of control and you could end up building a much bigger and stronger army than perhaps is desirable within the balance of the region?
I think that it's very clear that our goal is to build a stable defensive force and not an offensive force that will make the situation worse in Bosnia. And that's why arms control is the primary method for doing that. And we anticipate that there will be an arms control treaty or regime that will be very clear about what sort of weapons can be shipped into Bosnia. And that will have I think will play a big role in limiting exactly what happens.
If you're not paying for it and your forces are not doing the training, then you lose to some measure of control, don't you?
Well, behind your question is the suggestion that people are lining up with billions of dollars to shower on the Bosnian effort, and so far we haven't found that to be the case. You had a question.
Yes, the arrest of Juan Garcia Abrego yesterday in Mexico, can you tell me anything about the U.S. role in that?
I cannot. I do know that there'll be a press conference later today involving FBI and other Justice Department officials, and I think that's the best place to get answers to those questions. Yes?
In meetings on the Hill last week, Dr. Perry acknowledged, apparently to some members of the Senate, that slippage is being considered in the timing of the new attack submarine development. Can you tell us whether any decisions have been made on that, and also whether there are any other procurement programs that are being considered to be slipped because of budget crunches?
I hope that's not one of them slipping right now above your head. I can't, I'll try to get an answer for you on that. I just don't know.
Can you tell us if the United States is willing to deploy troops to the Golan Heights in the event of a future peace agreement between Israel and Syria?
Well, our position on that is very well known. First, if there is a peace agreement between Syria and Israel, and if the two parties request that we send troops to monitor the Golan Heights, then after consultation with Congress, we would be willing to do that, or we would be willing to consider doing it. I'm quite sure that we would find a way to do that, but the decision is very much contingent on two things. One, there has to be a peace agreement, and two, both parties have to request it.
Is there contingency planning going on for such a possible deployment?
Well, I think that our primary role right now is working for a lasting, comprehensive peace in the Middle East. Secretary Christopher recently came back from the Middle East, and we'll continue to work on that. That's the first thing we have to do is secure a peace agreement. After that, we'll consider ways to make sure that the peace holds.
Thank you.
Well,